Hello, hello. We have the bridge to Belle Island. We're on chapter 20. Mr. Adair just made his confession. Not guilty, but he did see stuff. So that's why he was acting all sus. So here we go, chapter 20. In the morning, Carlotta helped Isabel dress and pinned up her hair as usual. She smiled as she did so, mentioning Captain Curtis had returned from London. When she finished her tasks and left the room, Isabel lingered in her bedchamber alone, thinking back to the previous night. With the clarity of a new day, she realized how strange her actions must have seemed, pouring out wine late at night in her dressing gown. At first Mr. Booker and then Mr. Hardy, catching her in the act. Her neck heated at the thought of what they must think of her. Isabel recalled the look on Mr. Booker's face when he discovered her in the still room. Surprise, disillusionment, and something else. Resolve? She didn't know. He'd been so shocked when Mr. Hardy interrupted them that he dropped the bottle on his foot. Poor man. And he'd been chagrined as well. She had seen it in his red, rigid face. Even so, when Mr. Hardy asked him why he was standing by while she destroyed evidence, he echoed back her earlier rationale. She hoped he truly believed her explanation, and even agreed with it. Or did he think she was guilty but defended her actions anyway? Why would he do that? Unless perhaps he admired her? Even if he did, she did not think she could respect a man who would defend someone he believed guilty of a heinous crime simply because he was attracted to her. Isabel wondered what Mr. Hardy had meant when he'd referred to Benjamin as forever the noble knight trying to protect the damsel in distress, innocent or not. Mr. Booker had insisted this was an entirely different situation. Different from what? Had he been involved with a guilty woman in the past? She didn't hear the rest of their conversation because greedy old Hamish had started licking up the spilled wine, and by the time she'd returned from taking him outside, the men had retired. She hoped Mr. Booker would not suffer repercussions for defending her, nor regret doing so. Earlier that morning, the housemaid who brought up the hot water had told her Mr. Hardy planned to leave that day. Isabel was not sure if that was good news for her or bad. Had he decided to return to London to report her actions to the Bow Street officer, along with Mr. Adair's confession? Hoping to talk to Mr. Booker, Isabel walked down to the study, but the door was closed. Leaning near, she heard his and Mr. Hardy's voices in low conversation. With a sigh, Isabel climbed the stairs to the rooftop parapet again. Pushing open the door, the breeze loosened her carefully pinned hair and whipped it into her face. But she relished the cool, refreshing air anyway. Picking up the field glasses, she surveyed Riverton on the opposite shore and noticed no boats currently moored at the village pier. She looked up and then down river. A few boats were out, a fishing boat, an eel skiff, and there a Thames River barge with red-brown sails. She recalled Enos Redknapp saying he'd come by water. Was he already back in London, or was he still lurking about somewhere nearby? Thames River barges were narrow, flat-bottomed boats built for the shallow estuary near London. Their masts could even be lowered to clear bridges. She didn't often see them this far upriver. Might it belong to Enos Redknapp, or was she jumping to worrisome conclusions again? After breakfast, Benjamin and Mr. Hardy met for a last time in the study. The older man seemed much recovered and more his usual self. He had apparently accepted Miss Wilder's word that Benjamin had not aided her in disposing of the wine, for he did not raise the topic again. Instead, Benjamin asked a few clarifying questions about the terms of the trust, and they discussed their plan of action. Ben would stay and continue his search for a newer will, and if unsuccessful, help Miss Wilder navigate the steps if she decided to challenge the trust in court. It would be easier to have Mr. Hardy replaced as trustee than removed altogether, as most judges were skeptical of a woman's ability to manage her own affairs or finances. Bruh. Benjamin had little doubt of Isabel Wilder's abilities, but just what was she capable of? Mr. Hardy said, "If she doesn't want me to serve, I am quite willing to step down." "Even if you did, it would not give her the freedom she desires," Benjamin replied. "The trustee directs that in that case you appoint someone else from the firm." "Who would you suggest?" "There is no one more qualified than you, sir. I'm sure I can convince her of that." Hardy sent him a wry grin. "Better the devil you know than the devil you don't, eh?" Benjamin chuckled. "Something like that." He promised to keep his mentor apprised by writing with any further developments. Meanwhile, Mr. Hardy would return to London and report to Bow Street what they had learned about Adair, and also that Captain Curtis had an idea who might have killed Mr. Norris. With Officer Riley so focused on Miss Wilder, they'd neglected to mention Curtis's surprising statement. Ben had seen the captain return over the bridge last evening and planned to question him as soon as possible. Hardy also planned to see what he could find out about Enos Redknapp, in case the man persisted in threatening Miss Wilder. After he and Ben had finished talking, Mr. Hardy picked up his brief bag and valise, and together they crossed the hall. "Safe journey, sir." "It's not me I worry about," Hardy said. "I can't rid myself of the feeling that you might be in danger here." "I shall be careful." The two men shook hands, and Mr. Hardy left the house. Ben was halfway back to the study when a loud pop cracked the air. A gunshot? A hunter too near the house? Benjamin stepped to the window and looked out. A flock of startled birds flapped to sudden flight, screeching in alarm. And there on the lawn, Mr. Hardy grasped his arm and teetered, then fell to his knees. His heart lurched. "No!" Benjamin ran, jumping over the sleeping dog, and bolted outside to his mentor and friend. "Mr. Hardy, I'm here. Are you badly hurt?" Only then did he realize he'd put himself in harm's way by leaving the house and joining the man. So be it. Mr. Hardy clutched his sleeve. Blood seeped between his fingers. He'd been shot in the back of the arm. "What happened?" a voice called. He looked up. There was Miss Wilder on the roof, field glasses in hand. "He's been shot! Send for Dr. Grant." "I'll send Jacob directly." She set down the glasses and ran off to do so. "Where did the shot come from?" Benjamin asked, looking all around. From an upper window, he wondered, or the woods? Could a shot have reached them from across the bridge, or from a passing boat? Mr. Hardy panted, "I don't know." Young Joe came jogging up the shore path from the direction of the point, book under his arm, eyes large and fearful. Was he shot?" "Yes." "I heard the crack," the boy said. "Something whizzed through the bush beside me, and leaves went flying." "Did you see where the shot came from?" Joe shook his head. "I'm afraid I ducked." "Wise move." Joe looked over his shoulder. "It must have come from behind the stables." Ben prompted, "Or from a boat on the river?" "Oh." "Yes, could have been." Benjamin was tempted to dash around the house to see if any boats were moving away on the other side of the island, but he didn't want to leave the injured man. Instead, he held a clean handkerchief to the wound and applied pressure. Jacob ran out the door and went running over the bridge, casting a concerned glance back at the fallen man. Where is everyone else? Benjamin wondered. Why were Joe, Isabel, and Jacob the only ones to respond? But to Hardy he said only, "Come, let's get you into the house." Miss Wilder and Carlotta came out to help. Ben assisted Mr. Hardy to his feet, and together they led the injured man inside and settled him on the sofa in the morning room. Miss Wilder brought him a lap rug, and Carlotta went to ask Mrs. Philpotts for hot water and cloths, just in case. Dr. Grant hurried into the house a few minutes later, carrying his medical bag. He joined them and quickly assessed the wound. "A stray bullet, do you think? Someone shooting birds or poaching?" "We don't know," Benjamin replied, thinking of Enos Redknapp. Or was Captain Curtis, with his bitter grudge against Mr. Hardy, and so recently returned from London, the more likely suspect? "I don't see many gunshots in my practice," Grant said, but thankfully the bullet passed through muscle without striking bone. Mr. Hardy grimaced. Burns like Hades. If you have any laudanum in that bag of yours, I would not say no. Right. Dr. Grant dug a vial from his bag and measured out a dose of the stuff. I won't win any awards for my needlework, I'm afraid, but you'll need stitches. Just do what you need to do, and quickly, Hardy said between clenched teeth. Half an hour later, Hardy sat atop the bed in the guest room he'd occupied, while Dr. Grant finished the bandaging. Benjamin said, Thank God it wasn't worse. You might have been killed. Yes, I should be thankful, I know. Would be more grateful if it didn't hurt like the blazes. Sorry, Benjamin asked. Did you see anyone with a gun? Any sign of Captain Curtis? Any boats passing? Hardy squinted in concentration. Might have been. Did you notice anyone on the bridge or behind the stables? He shook his head. I only saw Miss Wilder. On the roof. Benjamin wondered again why no one else had come at the sound of a gunshot. Where were Adair and Rose and Captain Curtis? Dr. Grant stowed his supplies and prepared to take his leave. I would stay, but Mr. Jones is doing poorly. Of course you must go, Isabel replied. Thank you for coming so quickly. A short while later, the local constable arrived, alerted by Dr. Grant. Miss Wilder introduced Leonard Ray to them, explaining that he was the miller, serving a 1-year term as constable. When she described the shooting, Mr. Ray ruefully shook his head. Might mean poachers in the area. The magistrate does not tolerate poaching and metes out stiff penalties. I dread reporting this to him. The miller seemed to find the shooting of a man less objectionable than the illegal shooting of game. The longer Ray talked, the more Benjamin realized that he had little experience or authority. In fact, the man made Constable Buxton and Officer Riley seem like models of efficiency. Ray asked Mr. Hardy a few questions, and then they left him to rest. Walking back downstairs with the constable, Benjamin said, There is another possibility. Someone may have shot Mr. Hardy intentionally. In fact, I witnessed an altercation between Mr. Hardy and Evan Curtis only a few days ago. He was angry with Mr. Hardy and would have struck him had I not held him back. I have no other proof that he did this, but you should at least talk to him. Miss Wilder paled. Surely not. The constable sighed. Very well. Where is Curtis now? Jacob was dispatched to summon the captain. As the young man hurried out the garden door toward the tenant cottages, the others gathered in the morning room. When Captain Curtis joined them a short while later, he winked at Carlotta, then smiled at the miller turned constable. Leo, you old devil, what are you doing here? Parish business, I'm afraid. Where were you about an hour ago? Evan shrugged. In my father's cottage. Can he vouch for that? No. He leaves early to do his work. Why? What's going on? Isabel said, Someone shot Mr. Hardy. He looked at her blankly. No. Yes. Thankfully, he wasn't badly hurt. You think I shot him? The constable said, I've been told you had quite a row with him. I was angry, yes, but I didn't shoot him. Do you have a gun with you here on the island? Of course I do, and I am an excellent shot. If I had wanted to kill him, he would be dead now, instead of merely whining over a flesh wound. The constable turned to Miss Wilder. And you, miss, do you keep a gun? Not for my own use, but my father owned a few for hunting and shooting. Abel keeps them in his cottage to ward off the occasional weasel in the henhouse. Would he have any reason to shoot Mr. Hardy? I don't think so. The constable sighed again. Better talk to him too, just in case. Jacob was again sent out to summon him. While they waited, Benjamin thought about Abel coming into the stables with the gun aimed, ready to shoot at the slightest provocation. He asked Miss Wilder, You were up on the roof when the shot was fired. Did you see anything or anyone? She shook her head. I saw Mr. Hardy emerge from the house, but beyond that, no. No one on the bridge? No boats passing? Several boats were on the river this morning. Boats pass by regularly. She tilted her head to one side in thought. Though I was surprised to see a sailing barge rather near the island. The captain's eyebrows rose high. A sailing barge with red-brown sails? Isabel turned to look at him. Yes, why? Before he could explain, his father entered. Abel Curtis held his hat in hand, concern etched into the deep lines of his face. He answered the constable's questions, looking rather bewildered, but not, Benjamin thought, guilty. Yes, he had a fowling piece and a rifle Mr. Wilder had given him, but he'd not had occasion to shoot either recently. Yes, he would surrender both for examination. He'd been trimming hedges all morning. He'd worked alone, but Mr. Houghton had seen him and could attest to this. The constable nodded. He said he would ask the weavers if they'd seen anything and do a quick search of the island as well. Before the man left to do so, Benjamin decided to take advantage of his presence. Captain Curtis, you told Mr. Hardy and me that you had an idea who killed Mr. Norris, but you would not tell us who you meant. Perhaps you would tell the constable? No, thank you. Wait, Mr. Norris? Constable Ray asked, face puckered in confusion at the apparent change in topic. Benjamin quickly filled the man in on Percival Norris's recent death. Evan? Miss Wilder turned pleading eyes toward the captain. If you know something, please tell us. Curtis huffed a long exhale. Look, I didn't strike Percy or poison him or anything else, but I may have had a hand in his death. Carlotta gasped. Shock creased his father's face, and he gripped a nearby table for support. What do you mean? Isabel asked. After I was put on half pay, I stayed in London for a time. Why did you not come straight home? Abel asked. You must have known how worried I'd be. I know. I'm sorry, Pa. But I left here planning to cut a figure in the world, show Percy he'd been wrong about me. That did not happen, and I was not eager to return a failure. In London, I met several other fellows in similar situations. Some of them found alternative sources of income, selling goods they had acquired by, shall we say, dubious means. The constable asked, Do you mean sham stevedores, tea skippers, whiskey runners, and the like? Slang terms for smugglers, Benjamin knew. Evan, no, his father feebly muttered. The captain kept his gaze on the constable. You put it more colorfully than I would, Leo, but yes, though they preferred the term free traders. I also began asking around about Percival Norris. It's no secret I held a grudge against him, the man who had me shipped off, or so I thought. I learned he was in debt and looking to borrow money. At the same time, the leader of my new band of friends was seeking someone with higher connections to find buyers for some luxury goods that may have avoided customs tax on their way over from France and the Netherlands. The only toff I knew in London was Norris, so I suggested him. Enos met with Percy and found him willing to help. For a price, of course. Enos Redknapp? Miss Medina asked, anger flashing in her dark eyes. He looked at her. Yes. Have you met him? Unfortunately, I have. He held her gaze a moment, and when Carlotta said no more, Miss Wilder added, I have met him too. In fact, he was here again yesterday. The captain muttered an epithet and ran a hand over his mouth. I did not think it through. It never occurred to me that Percy would boast that he controlled an island on the Thames. We're upriver from Enos's usual foraging grounds around the East India docks, and out of reach of the marine police. When he heard about it, Enos thought Belle Island's lagoon might make a good hiding place for his barge and his goods. No, Isabel breathed. Carlotta looked at her. Did I not tell you? Curtis went on. I tried to convince Enos not to pursue the idea, saying Riverton was too far to go and Miss Wilder would never agree to it. But Percival told Enos he was sure he could convince her of the merits of letting out part of the island. When the man first came here, Isabel said, Uncle Percy told me he was looking for a site to build a boatyard. I believed him. But then... She sent a questioning look at Carlotta, who nodded and took up the tale. I saw him from the window and recognized him. He'd threatened me when I refused to spend time with him, and that is why I came to Belle Island. I was furious with Percy for bringing him here, and also afraid, so I stayed out of sight. I knew he was no boat builder, but a dangerous man not to be trusted, and now he's back. Captain Curtis listened to Carlotta with concern on his face, then returned his attention to Isabel. He thought you'd be more amenable to the idea of a boatyard than a smuggling operation, and it's a plausible ploy. Lots of boat building on the Thames. At all events, Enos liked what he saw and gave Percy some money in good faith. Never a good idea to take money you have not yet earned from Enos Redknapp. Worse, apparently Percival used it to pay down what he owed to some other money-lenders. So when Isabel refused and Enos wanted his money back, Percy had already spent it. Benjamin said, I wonder if that gunshot was meant as a warning to her. Curtis frowned. I hope not. Abel looked stricken and pale. What were you thinking, lad? To lead such men to Miss Wilder's door? To mine? I know she's disappointed you, but she did nothing to deserve to have her home, her very life threatened. It was foolish. I see that now. I was blinded by my anger against Percy. My desire for revenge overwhelmed my better sense. I wanted him to lose his home, his hopes, his future, as I lost mine. I never meant to put Isabel in danger. Or you, Papa. I hope you believe me. Benjamin said, I am almost surprised you did not take your revenge more directly. Are you sure you did not? Killing him would have been more effective, would have taken all of that from him in one stroke. Curtis shook his head. I didn't want to kill him. Well, I confess I thought about it many times over those years, dodging bullets and having to kill or be killed in Spain, but mostly I wanted to see him knocked down a few pegs. The captain chuckled, but it was a mirthless sound. Huh, it's funny. I thought I would enjoy his fall, feel some satisfaction, some relief at his death, but I don't. I feel just... what a waste of time it has all been. Hating and plotting and longing for revenge. I wish I could have those years back. Be careful, the constable warned. You don't want to spend the years you have left in prison or transported. Well, if arranging an introduction between men of business is a crime, then I am guilty. But that's all I did. Benjamin asked, might Enos Redknapp have poisoned Mr. Norris in revenge, and perhaps shot Mr. Hardy for the same reason? Curtis shrugged. It's possible, but I know he wanted his money back, wanted to squeeze Percy for all he could get, which is hard to do if the man is dead. Unless he's moved on to squeezing Percival's associates or family. The constable, clearly struggling to keep up with all the volleys of information, asked, Does this Enos person own a sailing barge with red-brown sails? He does, as a matter of fact. Is he known to use guns? Might he have shot Mr. Hardy, whether he was the intended victim or someone else like Miss Wilder? The captain considered. Enos is no stranger to guns, so it is certainly a possibility, a dangerous possibility. They talked for a few minutes more. Then the constable asked Evan Curtis to stay put on the island until he'd had time to consult with the magistrate. He agreed, and the two Curtis men left by the rear garden door, just as Rose and Mr. Adair returned through it. The couple had apparently taken a leisurely stroll around the island and missed all the excitement. At least, Benjamin hoped that was true. Surely Mr. Adair would not do something so rash to keep Mr. Hardy from reporting his confession to the authorities, and from becoming successor trustee. The constable asked them if they had seen anything, and then took his leave as well. He had to step over Hamish on his way out. Isabel apologized and called to the dog. "Hamish, move away from the door." But Hamish would not be moving again. The dog was dead. Was it the wine that killed him? Or was he just old? The plot thickens. Enos is sketchy.